You can't just chain off someone's childhood. That's what I told her. Veronica Ellis, right there on the shoreline where the old wooden boat ramp used to slope gently into the lake. My lake. My grandfather's ramp. And now? Blocked off with a thick silver chain and a padlock that looked new enough to still have a receipt in her purse. She didn't even blink. Just gave me that tight-lipped smile that people wear when they think rules are shields. I'm sorry, Mr. Ward, this ramp is now designated for HOA community use only. You'll need to file for lake access through the board. Let me introduce myself. I'm Dylan Ward. I fix marine engines, tow boats in storms, and replace carburetors on outboards faster than most folks can tie a knot. But more importantly, I'm the grandson of Thomas Ward, who built this ramp himself in 1983, plank by plank with nothing but a toolbox, a stubborn spine, and a love for the lake that ran in our blood. He taught me to fish right off that ramp. He taught my son, Eli, too, until the HOA decided to rewrite history. Before I go further, I've got a question for you. Where are you watching from? Have you ever had to fight back against a homeowners association that forgot what the word neighbor even means? Let me know in the comments, and while you're here, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what comes next. See, that ramp isn't just lumber and rusted bolts. It's a piece of my family. Every memory I've got that matters started right there. Early mornings with the mist rolling off the lake, my grandfather's thermos clanking against the dock post, Eli holding a fishing rod too big for his hands, grinning like he'd just won the world. I didn't care about HOA meetings or rule books back then. I still don't. But I care about legacy, and when I saw that padlock, something in me snapped. Quietly. Like a knot tightening in my gut. Who voted for this? I asked. Veronica didn't answer, just turned on her heel and walked back to her spotless SUV, leaving Marty, the HOA's muscle in a tucked-in golf shirt, to linger a few seconds too long. You can take it up at the board meeting, he said like he was reading off a cue card. Sure, I replied, but I suggest you tell her to check who owns the shoreline before she starts locking up memories. That got him. Just a flicker. Enough for me to know they didn't expect pushback. They thought I'd roll over, same way everyone else had. I went home, still barefoot from the water, and pulled out the last envelope my grandfather left me. It wasn't dramatic, just a padded folder marked Ward Dock Stuff. Inside were faded photos, a brittle map, and receipts from the county. The ramp was never meant to be shared. It wasn't part of the HOA, it was ours, carved out before the association ever laid down its first bylaws. But they'd buried that history like weeds under gravel. The next morning, I found a fine taped to my front door. Trailer violation, non-compliant driveway storage. It wasn't about the trailer. This was personal now. Eli came down the stairs and saw the envelope in my hand. Another one? Yeah, I said, staring out the window. They're poking the bear. Are you going to poke back? I looked at the ramp from our kitchen window, just visible past the tree line. No, I said, I'm going to bury their boat launch. They didn't bury their launch overnight. That kind of revenge doesn't come with fireworks, it comes with patience and paperwork. But from the moment I told Eli my plan, things around the neighborhood started to shift. The next citation showed up 2 days later. Unapproved mailbox paint. HOA color code violation. That mailbox? My grandfather painted it navy blue in the 90s. No one said a word about it until now. Then came another. Unauthorized storage of marine equipment visible from curb. Translation, a rope and a life vest on the back deck. I started a pile on the kitchen counter. Each fine slid neatly on top of the last like they were planning a tower. Veronica never signed them personally, but Marty's initials were always there. Bottom right corner, slanted just enough to feel smug. Eli shook his head as he sorted through them. They're making this a game. I nodded. Good, because I've never been one to fold early. But it wasn't just the paperwork, it was the way neighbors started avoiding eye contact. The way conversations stopped when I walked into the community store. One woman, Nancy, I think, gave me a tight smile and said, "You know, it's probably best just to go through the board like everyone else." Everyone else didn't build the ramp, I said. I didn't blame her, not really. That's what HOAs count on, people being too tired to fight, too busy to question, too afraid to be next. But I've built engines under open skies, in freezing rain, with grease on my elbows and a lake freezing around my boots. I don't intimidate easily. Then came the unannounced inspection. It was a Friday afternoon. I'd just finished tuning a client's Evandroid when I noticed Marty walking the property line with a measuring wheel and clipboard. No knock, no call, no courtesy. "You lost?" I asked from the driveway. He didn't look up. Routine survey, just checking setbacks and fence height. Funny, I didn't see that mentioned in the last newsletter. He glanced at me, eyes flat. HOA reserves the right to inspect at any time. I stepped toward him, just enough to make him pause. "You're on private property now." He blinked. "Technically, it's within shared view." I smiled. "And technically, this is your last warning." He backed off after that, but the message was clear. They wanted me boxed in, hemmed by fear and regulation. They wanted me small. That night, Eli came into the garage where I'd laid out a makeshift timeline. Each citation, each visit, each subtle move. I had pins on a map, notes on the bylaws, and photos I'd taken of Veronica's backyard where her fence definitely exceeded height limits. "You're building a case," he said. "No," I replied. "I'm building a mirror." He looked confused. "They want to play by the book? Fine. I'll show them what's on every page, including the ones they tore out." Eli tapped one of the photos on the wall. "What's that?" "Community ramp," I said, "taken yesterday. 5 boats launched without permits, including one from a board member." He grinned. "You're not just poking the bear anymore, you're baiting it." I didn't answer, just stared at the image, boats cutting clean wakes across the lake, launching from my grandfather's shoreline without so much as a nod. That's when I knew this wasn't going to be a fight about fines or fences. It was going to be a fight about memory, about legacy and who gets to rewrite it. And I wasn't going to let them win that. The board meeting was scheduled for 6 p.m. sharp in the HOA club house, the one Veronica insisted be repainted every spring, even though it sat 50 yards from the lake and no one but the board ever used it. I got there 10 minutes early, folder in hand. I wasn't looking for a fight, I was bringing proof. The room smelled like lemon disinfectant and power trips. Folding chairs lined up in perfect rows, half filled with sun hats, polos, and people who didn't want to be there. Veronica sat at the head table, clipboard aligned squarely in front of her. Marty stood by the coffee table like a silent bouncer. "Mr. Ward," she said without looking up, "please keep your remarks to the 3-minute limit." I took a seat in the second row, centered. The folder rested on my lap like a quiet warning. "I'll take less than 3, I said. "I'm here to clarify property rights regarding the Ward family ramp, which, for the record, predates the founding of this HOA by over 2 decades. She gave a sharp smile. "All shoreline belongs to the community per Article 9 of the HOA, except the parts that were deeded privately prior to charter ratification," I replied, opening my folder. "Like this one." I held up a photocopy of the original property map, dated, notarized, grandfather's name etched at the corner. The room shifted. Someone coughed. One man in the back adjusted his glasses twice, but said nothing. Veronica didn't even blink. "If that document were valid, it would already be part of our registry." I smiled. "It is. County recorded. Parcel 7C. You've been trespassing on it every summer since 2004. That was when I saw her. Lisa Cartwright. HOA treasurer, widowed, wore cardigans in July and still sent handwritten Christmas cards. She sat 3 chairs from Veronica, holding a notepad she hadn't touched. Her eyes were locked on the table. One hand clutched the edge like it might float away. The other trembled so slightly I almost missed it. She wasn't looking at Veronica. She was looking at the map. I turned toward the crowd. "I'm not here to escalate, but I want the chain off my family's ramp. And I want these fines canceled, or we take this to county court and I start charging you for access." Marty scoffed. "You don't have standing to—" "Don't finish that sentence unless you've read Section 38 of the Lake Zoning Policy," I interrupted, "because I have, twice." Veronica's lips pressed into a line so tight it turned white. "We'll review the documents and notify you of our decision," she said, already reaching for the next agenda item like I was yesterday's weather. "That's fine," I said, gathering my folder. "But if I don't see that chain gone by Friday, you'll be reviewing your legal budget next." As I walked out, I glanced back once. Lisa Cartwright met my eyes. Just for a second, a flicker of guilt, or maybe grief. She didn't speak, didn't nod. but her face said enough. She knew. And maybe, just maybe, she was tired of pretending she didn't. Outside, the air felt different. Not lighter, just quieter. Eli was leaning against the truck, arms crossed. How bad was it? I tossed the folder onto the dashboard. They heard me. That's enough for now. He opened the door and paused. That woman in the blue sweater? She looked like she was gonna cry. Her name's Lisa, I said, and I think she's the one person in there who still knows this place used to be a neighborhood. Sometimes the loudest person in the room isn't the one yelling. It's the one who finally brings the truth to the table. Ever stood up to an HOA board and watched someone on the inside crack? Tell me your story in the comments, or just drop where you're watching from. And if this is hitting close to home, go ahead and subscribe. We're only just getting started. The chain stayed up. Friday came and went, and the ramp was still locked, tighter than Veronica's facial expression at the board meeting. No letter, no email, just silence. And that padlock catching sunlight like it belonged there. So I gave them what they wanted, attention. That weekend, I took Eli and a pair of binoculars down to the bluff trail that overlooked the opposite shoreline. We weren't there to fish, we were there to document. I had a hunch, and it paid off. 3 pontoon boats launched from the community ramp between noon and 3 p.m. All of them belonged to board members. None of them had permits displayed. One even used a private contractor to haul kayaks and coolers down a roped-off service path. I took photos. One shot showed Veronica herself, handing a drink to someone as Marty backed his boat into the water. No helmet, no tag, no HOA logo, just convenience. Eli zoomed in and laughed. They don't even try to hide it. No, I said, because they've never had to. That night, I compiled the images into a clean, unedited folder. No snark, no captions, just facts. Then I sent it anonymously to the neighborhood newsletter editor, Marion, a retiree with a love for fonts and grudges. I didn't sign my name. The following Wednesday, the newsletter arrived. Selective enforcement? Right there on page 2, a full spread of HOA board members enjoying the ramp they claimed was under review, photos included. By Thursday, I had 3 neighbors stop me while walking the dog. Did you see the newsletter? One asked. I had no idea, said another. Curtis, a guy 2 blocks down, grinned and whispered, Veronica's head nearly. But I didn't celebrate, because later that evening I came home to find a bright orange notice posted on my front door. Property review pending, unauthorized shoreline structure. They'd tagged the old dock light, a fixture my grandfather wired himself back when people respected tools more than paperwork. Eli stared at it. They're just making stuff up now. They're retaliating, I said, peeling it down, and retaliation leaves fingerprints. I walked straight into the garage and opened my folder again. Every violation, every photo, every timestamp. Now it wasn't just about legacy, it was becoming a case. The next morning, I received a voicemail from someone unexpected. Lisa Cartwright. Her voice was soft, measured, but I could hear something cracking underneath it. Mr. Ward, Dylan, I just wanted you to know I didn't support the decision to escalate this. I thought the matter would resolve internally. I think we've gone too far. She didn't say sorry. She didn't need to. Her call wasn't about apology. It was the first breadcrumb. That evening, Eli and I walked the lake's perimeter, just like my grandfather and I used to when I was Eli's age. Same twilight hum of cicadas, same light breeze off the water. You think this ends soon? Eli asked. No, I said, but it's starting to tip. How do you know? I looked across the lake at the community ramp, empty now, quiet, like it knew the storm was coming. Because when people start whispering, I said, the truth isn't far behind. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about Lisa's voicemail. She hadn't said much, but she'd said enough to make it clear there were cracks forming inside the board, and cracks, in my experience, always mean one thing: pressure's working. I stood in the garage, eyes tracing over the stack of documents and photos spread across the workbench. I needed more than pictures and property maps. I needed something indisputable, something that would make it impossible for Veronica to spin this as non-compliance or an administrative error. That's when I remembered the basement. It had been years since I'd gone down there, The overhead pole string light barely worked, and the back half of the storage room still smelled faintly of motor oil and cedar. My grandfather kept everything: manuals, tackle boxes, boat logs, and paperwork filed the way only old men with steel trap memories ever did. I flipped the switch. The light flickered, then buzzed to life, casting long shadows along the cinder block walls. I moved slow, the air heavy with dust and time. Against the far wall sat an old wooden filing cabinet. 3 drawers, rusted handles. It hadn't been opened since the day after we spread his ashes off the bow of his John boat. My hand hovered for a moment before I pulled the top drawer open. Receipts, permits, zoning letters. I scanned quickly, flipping through plastic sleeves filled with typed documents and folded maps. But it was the second drawer that held what I didn't even know I needed. A thick brown envelope labeled in black marker. Langston, Shoreline, 1983. I sat on the concrete floor, heart thumping, not with excitement, but with the weight of something finally revealing itself. Inside the envelope, a signed contract from the county confirming the original purchase of the Shoreline lot, a hand-drawn map labeled by my grandfather himself, with coordinates and easement notes, and a yellowed copy of a permit application for community access denial, stamped received but not processed. It had been ignored, probably buried, just like this drawer. I ran my fingers over the edge of the paper, feeling the impressions of his handwriting, deliberate, blocky, unmistakably his. These weren't just forms. This was a trail of ownership, a paper spine connecting my name to land they'd been treating like their personal marina. Footsteps overhead. Eli. "You good down there?" he called. "Better than good," I said. "I think I just found the ghost in the machine." 10 minutes later, we were sitting at the kitchen table, the documents spread out between us like some long-forgotten treasure map. "What's this?" he asked, pointing to the hand-drawn boundary line. "Proof," I said, "that they knew this was never theirs, and that my grandfather tried to stop them before it even started." Eli leaned back in his chair, quiet. "So now what?" "Now," I said, "we make sure this doesn't get ignored twice." I scanned and copied everything, 3 digital backups, 1 printed set, 1 sealed in an envelope addressed to my lawyer. I wasn't taking any chances. That night, I sat out on the bench beneath a sycamore tree, the one that overlooked the water. Same spot where Grandpa used to sip his coffee, legs crossed, saying nothing for whole minutes at a time. It was quiet now, but not empty. "I found it, Pop," I said under my breath. "They buried it, but I found it." And this time, they wouldn't be the ones writing the next chapter. The next morning, I returned to the water's edge. Same bench, same view. But now the weight in my pocket wasn't grief, it was leverage. I unfolded Grandpa's hand-drawn map and laid it flat against the bench plank. The paper was warped from age, the ink faded in places, but the lines were still clear. He had traced everything: the slope of the shoreline, the natural break in the trees, the original boundary markers carved into stone back before property lines were etched in saddle. And there it was, a red X near the south end, scribbled with the note, old survey pin, boundary start. I stood and followed the coastline. The grass grew high along the ridge, but I could still see the small stone stake tucked between the roots of a buckled cypress tree. I crouched low, brushing away the moss and soil. The metal cap was there, just like he said. It matched the coordinate on the map, which meant every fence post the HOA had installed between here and the launch ramp was built on our side. I took a photo, then another, then I dropped a surveyor's stake right beside it. That afternoon, I drove to the local land records office with the documents Grandpa had left behind. The clerk, an older man with tired eyes and an "I've seen worse" shrug, took one look and raised a brow. "Where'd you get this permit?" he asked, pointing to the unprocessed shoreline restriction. "Found it in my grandfather's old files. He submitted it in 1983. The clerk nodded. "Langston, right? Your family name's still on the deed for the eastern waterfront edge. Technically, if this permit had been processed back then, the HOA wouldn't have had a leg to stand on." "It wasn't," I said, "and now they're launching boats like they own the shoreline." He gave a tired sigh and slid the papers into a scanner. "I'll log this into the historical archive. If anyone disputes it, they'll have to file through county records." "Good, let 'em." When I got home, I found Eli out by the dock tightening the ropes on our skiff. The lake shimmered behind him, sun cutting through the trees just the way it did in my memory, on that last morning out with Grandpa. "You've been quiet," I said. He glanced up. "Just thinking about all the years we let them act like they owned the place, like we were renting memories." I sat beside him. "We didn't know." He looked at me sideways. "And now that we do? We let them bury it once. We don't do that again." Later that night, I returned to the basement. There was one more drawer I hadn't checked. Inside, I found an old camcorder, dusty, half buried under boat maintenance logs. I popped the tape out, half expecting it to snap from age, but when I slid it into an old player, the screen flickered to life. The footage was grainy. Grandpa was sitting on the bench, same view, holding the same map. He spoke directly to the camera. "If you're watching this, it means someone tried to erase what we built. This shoreline was ours long before they put up signs. Don't let them take it without remembering what it cost to keep it in the family." My throat tightened. He paused, then added, "There's a copy of everything at the lawyer's office in Fort Myers. You'll know what to do when the time comes." I did. The next morning, I called that lawyer. His assistant confirmed, yes, a package was there, still sealed, marked with our family name and labeled Shoreline Trust, to be released upon dispute. I booked a same-day appointment. Game on. My grandfather didn't fight for that shoreline just so we could watch it get swallowed by red tape and ego. He left us more than property, he left us proof, and now it's our turn to make it count. If you've ever had to defend your family's legacy, or if someone tried to take something that was never theirs to begin with, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I see you, I hear you, and you're not alone. I didn't sleep that night. The letter, the notebook, the maps, they all sat like loaded weapons on my kitchen table. Everything pointed to one thing. The lot Rachel and the HOA used as their personal marina legally belonged to my grandfather. I wasn't just angry, I was ignited. By 7 a.m. I was in town with a cup of gas station coffee in one hand and that notarized deed in the other. My first stop was the county records office. I asked to pull all historical deeds linked to parcel 48B, the waterfront lot Rachel had roped off. The clerk, a woman named Darlene with big glasses and a sharp mind, scanned the records. She muttered. "Well, that's strange." She turned her monitor so I could see. This property was transferred back in '78, but there's no official HOA filing for this lot, just a private deed. Your grandfather's name is on it, and it was never sold. I leaned in, almost whispering, "So legally it's still his?" She nodded slowly. "And now it's yours, if you have the trust paperwork or inheritance doc to back it up, which, if that notebook is right, you do." I walked out of that office, standing taller. The air felt different, like I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was building something, and I needed help. I called Logan. He picked up with a grunt. "Didn't expect to hear from you so soon." "You said you wanted to help," I said. "I've got what we need to prove they're using private land, but I need someone to guide me through the rest." There was a pause, then Logan said, "You ever been to a board audit meeting?" "Nope." "Well, you're about to, because they have one next Friday and you're going to be there with your documents. And I'll make sure the county assessor is watching." I spent the next few days quietly preparing, scanning the documents, getting copies notarized, filing preliminary claims with the county. Logan helped me draft a cease and desist order addressed to the HOA. It would be served the day of the meeting. The best part? I didn't have to go at it alone. Marla, the conflicted board member, showed up at my porch one evening. Her hand trembled as she held a file folder. "This was buried in Rachel's old HOA files. I made a copy," she whispered. "It proves she knowingly used land outside HOA control. She edited the maps before presenting them to the board." I stared at her, heart pounding. "Why are you doing this now?" She took a shaky breath. "Because I've got a son who fishes off that dock, and because watching her destroy people, it's making me sick." I took the folder and nodded. "Thank you, Marla. You just turned the tide." The night before the meeting, I stood at the edge of our old ramp, the one that had once welcomed my grandfather's fishing boat every Sunday. The wind was low, the lake quiet, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel outnumbered. I felt ready. The morning of the audit meeting, I wasn't pacing. Right along the edge of my property, I dug a hole and placed a wooden post, weathered, sturdy, and carved by hand. It was an old mooring post from my father's dock. I hadn't touched it in years, but today it felt like a marker, like putting down an anchor before a storm. The HOA had pushed us into the deep, but I was done drifting. I wanted them to know we were grounded. Marla texted at 9:13 IMEM sharp. They're all gathering, minutes from now. Inside the house, my son Matt had set up 2 cameras, one facing the HOA boardroom from a legal distance through a neighbor's screened window, and another hidden in a hollowed book on the community table inside the clubhouse. Both were tested, recording, and time-stamped. We weren't just making a scene, we were documenting fraud. I slipped on my jacket, tucked a printout of the anonymous tip I'd submitted to the county ethics board into my pocket, and walked down the gravel path toward the clubhouse. The air smelled like cut grass and lake water, the kind of scent that reminded me of my dad's old flannel shirts drying in the sun. The moment I stepped onto the clubhouse porch, I saw Veronica's face harden. She was flanked by Ed and Denise, both posturing like linebackers. Karen sat hunched at the far end, pretending to type notes. "You're not invited to internal HOA audits," Veronica said, her voice syrupy and sharp. "Oh, I'm not staying," I said, pulling out the notice. "Just here to serve you all something." Her eyes narrowed as she read the heading, "Formal Ethics Complaint Filed, Breach of Fiduciary Duty." Beneath it, highlighted, was the list of expenditures. Boat ramp access, upgrades on the HOA waterfront lot, paid entirely with dues, but never installed. "You're bluffing," Ed muttered, snatching the page. "Nope." "County's looking into misuse of funds. You might want to sit for the audit now, Ed. Could be your last as treasurer." They didn't let me in, but they shut the doors in panic, and the camera inside rolled for 52 minutes, recording every panicked whisper, every misplaced invoice, every quiet admission. Back at home, I brewed coffee and watched the live feed with Matt. Marla called twice, nervous but steady, and gave us the time of the emergency meeting they were now scheduling to discuss damage control. They knew they were caught. They just didn't know how many walls were closing in. But here's the twist. This wasn't the end game. Because the HOA waterfront lot, the one they'd funneled funds into to keep us from accessing the lake, it was up for private sale. The developer they'd tried to work with had backed out, and my friend from high school, Levi, now a land broker, had quietly alerted me about it 3 weeks ago. While they were clinging to their rules, I was moving paperwork. "Dad," Matt said, watching the screen, "if you buy that lot, they'll have nowhere left to launch from," I said. He nodded, smiling, poetic. I still remember standing on that ramp with my dad, holding a rusted lantern as we fished past midnight. I used to think that dock was where I learned patience, but I realize now it's where I learned principle. By nightfall, the paperwork was submitted. I'd matched the asking price. Levi handled the closing agreement under his firm's shell name. Veronica didn't know it yet, but the same HOA lot she weaponized was now mine. I didn't say a word when the sale closed. I let the silence speak. The same silence my dad used when I messed up as a teenager. No lecture, just that quiet look of, "You'll figure it out." 3 days passed. The HOA board moved like nervous deer in a field, eyes darting, ears twitching, knowing the hunters were out there, but not knowing which bush we were behind. The emergency meeting notice they posted on the community board was printed in bold red letters, as if urgency would cover incompetence. It didn't. I waited until that morning to let the truth out. I pulled into the community lot at 7:45 IE-min right before the sun fully crested the trees. That same light used to hit my father's boat as we launched from our old dock, now fenced, now chained, but never forgotten. I parked by the lake, walked past the HOA's old sign, and hammered a brand new one into the grass. Private property, no launching without owner authorization. By the time Veronica arrived with her latte and clipboard, a small group had already gathered. Neighbors in golf carts, some dog walkers, a few curious teenagers, all reading the sign, some smiling. She stepped out, pale, then flushed. "What is this?" I stayed calm. "New signage. I own the lot now. That includes this entire strip." That's impossible. "It closed Tuesday. County records updated this morning. Want a copy of the deed?" She blinked, stumbled forward, then caught herself. From the edge of the crowd, Marla hovered with her purse clutched tight, visibly holding back a grin. Her glance toward Veronica lasted only a second, but it spoke volumes. "This is an abuse of authority," Ed barked from behind, pushing through. "This land belongs to the HOA. "No," I said, pulling out a folder. "This land was acquired for public auction when the developer backed out. You misused HOA funds on improvements for a property you didn't own. I now own it. And that misuse? It's documented, every penny." I handed copies of the expenditures to 2 nearby residents, loud enough for everyone to hear. People began murmuring, the kind of murmuring that shakes pillars. Karen tried to step in with her usual robotic voice. "We will be reviewing this internally." "No, you won't," I cut in, "because there's no internal left. I've submitted the documentation to the county board. An independent audit's been triggered." The silence after that wasn't awkward. It was cold, surgical. "You'll regret this," Veronica hissed, barely audible. I leaned in. "You already do. You just don't know how much." She turned to leave, but Matt was ready. He'd brought his drone, hovering just overhead, filming the crowd, the sign, the stunned faces. Legally done, publicly broadcasted. Within the hour, the footage was online. By sunset, I had messages from 3 neighbors I barely knew. One offered to mow my yard, another said they cried watching the video. A third just wrote, "Thank you for standing up." We were too scared. I walked the shoreline later that night, that deed still folded in my back pocket like a badge. I stopped by the old rock where Dad once carved our initials when I was a boy. The carving was weathered, but still there. I ran my fingers over it over the years, the effort, the quiet dignity he lived by. That rock became more than a memory. It was a reminder. We don't inherit just land. We inherit the fight to keep it free. I stood there until the stars came out, the breeze carrying the scent of pine and lake water, just like the nights Dad and I would fish in silence. This battle wasn't just about a boat ramp. It was about honoring the past while protecting what's right. And as I looked back at that old rock, I whispered, "We're still here, Dad, and they're not getting past me." Have you ever had to defend something that mattered to your family? Drop your story in the comments. I want to hear what you're fighting for. And let me know where you're watching from. "Is this what you were looking for?" Henry's voice was low, like he knew the walls had ears. He slid the folder across my workbench, glancing out the garage window like someone might be watching. I flipped it open. Legal documents, property maps, and old meeting transcripts going back a decade. And one page stood out. A private purchase agreement between the HOA board and a shell company tied to none other than President Karen Meyer's husband. The waterfront community lot, the one they claimed belonged to the HOA and used to justify blocking my family's access, was never actually transferred properly. The paperwork was incomplete, missing a witness signature and notarization. This is a nightmare for them," I said, heart racing. "This changes everything." Henry nodded, but didn't smile. They counted on no one ever checking. It was after midnight, but I wasn't sleeping. I sat under the porch light with a cup of burnt coffee, the folder heavy on my lap. I kept rereading the papers, searching for loopholes or traps. But no, this was solid, legal gold. Karen and the board had no right to enforce control over the ramp. The land never legally belonged to them in the first place. I called Monica, my cousin's wife, who worked in county records, the next morning. She confirmed it quietly, cautiously. "This is enough to initiate a claim, but if you want it to stick, you need to buy it before they can cover their tracks." Which meant I had to move fast. I called our lawyer, the one who handled Dad's will and our family land transfer years back. His voice lit up as he read the files. "This is textbook fraud, and if the HOA can't prove ownership, the lot reverts to public auction within 60 days. That was my in. I drove straight to the county office with a cashier's check, making the down payment on the very lot Karen had weaponized. I didn't tell a soul, not yet. The sale wouldn't go public for another week while paperwork cleared. That gave me time. Back home, I started cleaning up the path by the old dock. It had overgrown after they barricaded the entrance, vines curling over the wooden beams like the lake itself was holding its breath, but I kept going, every rake of my shovel feeling like digging into Karen's lies. 3 days later, HOA board members started showing up again, more frequent, more aggressive. They accused me of unauthorized repairs, said I was tampering with association land. One even tried to take photos for evidence. I didn't flinch. You should really check your records, I told them. They might not be as airtight as you think. Karen showed up that evening, arms folded like a queen surveying her crumbling kingdom. You think you're clever, don't you? No, I said, just careful. Her eyes narrowed. We're not going to let you take control of this neighborhood. I'm not taking anything, I said, just reclaiming what's mine. She stormed off, but I could see her confidence cracking. Something in her walk faltered, a hesitation she didn't have before. That night I saw Henry again. He handed me a flash drive. What's this? I asked. The missing board meeting recordings, he said. The ones they claimed never existed. One of them has Karen admitting the transfer never completed. She knew. They all did. I stared at the drive like it was a grenade. Why now? Henry looked at me, tired but resolute. Because someone finally fought back. And I've had enough of watching good people lose to cowards. This was it. The final nail. I had the deed, the documents, and now a confession. And the best part? The board meeting was scheduled for Saturday. Public. Recorded. I started organizing my files, creating timelines, marking statements, highlighting clauses. I wasn't just walking in to win. I was walking in to end their grip on the entire neighborhood. Saturday came with the kind of silence that presses on your chest. I stood in the back of the community hall, a folder in one hand, flash drive in the other. The HOA board sat at their long table beneath a banner that read, Everpine Lakes HOA Quarterly Meeting. Karen Myers sat at the center, rigid, lips pinched into a permanent sneer. There were more neighbors than usual this time. Word had spread, maybe not the details, but enough. People had grown tired of the secrecy, the citations, the constant threats masked as policy. I caught glimpses of quiet nods, tired eyes, folded arms. This wasn't just about me anymore. Karen tapped her pen against a clipboard. Let's begin. First on the agenda, unauthorized work at the community lakefront ramp. I didn't move right away. I waited, letting her hang in that self-satisfied smirk. Then I stepped forward. I'd like to respond to that. She didn't bother to hide her disdain. This isn't a courtroom, Mr. Langley. No, I said, laying the flash drive on the table. But maybe it should be. I turned to the crowd. You all know my father. You knew the ramp we used, my family's ramp, for over 30 years. You watched Karen and this board chain it off without proof, without transparency. You saw them fine me for walking across land they didn't even legally own. Murmurs began rising, like a wave just starting to curl. Karen stood. This is slander. No, I said calmly. This is fact. I handed the folder to the community secretary, an older woman named Ruth who hadn't smiled in a year. Her hands trembled just slightly as she flipped through the highlighted documents, maps, the incomplete deed, purchase timelines. I pointed to the projector. Play the recording. Karen's voice filled the room. It was from a closed-door board session, her saying, and I quote, "The transfer's not on paper, but no one's going to check. We'll just enforce it anyway." The room went dead quiet. Then someone near the back, a man who'd once been fined for hanging a flag on his porch, laughed once. Sharp and sudden. Karen's face drained. This doesn't prove anything. That audio is stolen. It was provided by a board member, I said, nodding toward Henry, who stood in the doorway, arms crossed, gaze steady. And it confirms what's already in writing. You tried to enforce power over land you never owned. Gasps. A few people stood. I stepped forward, voice low but unwavering. I've purchased the waterfront lot. The sale is legal, notarized, and complete. As of this morning, the ramp belongs to me. And let me be crystal clear. Your authority ends where my property line begins. Karen reached for her gavel like it could still silence me. This meeting is adjourned. No, Ruth interrupted, voice cracking but firm. Not until we vote. That stunned even me. Ruth looked out across the room, eyes scanning each neighbor. Raise your hand if you support removing Karen Myers from her position due to breach of ethics and abuse of power. One by one, hands went up. Reluctantly at first, then in clusters, then nearly the entire room. Karen looked around, stunned, alone. Henry stepped forward and placed his resignation letter on the table. You're not going to pin this on anyone else, Karen. We followed your lead because we were afraid. That ends now. She stood there trembling, not from fear, but rage denied its outlet. She grabbed her bag and stormed out, the doors swinging closed behind her. I stood by the podium, fingers brushing the edge like it was a finish line. And yet, it didn't feel like a victory parade. It felt like justice. Quiet. Overdue, but real. Ruth turned to me. We'll need help managing the transition. I smiled, thinking of Dad's weathered notebook tucked in my drawer, the one with sketches of how he wanted to restore the ramp. I'll be around. As neighbors left, many paused to shake my hand. Some clapped me on the back. One older gentleman whispered, "Took a lot of guts, son." I nodded. Wasn't just for me. 3 weeks later, the old dock was quiet again, just how Dad liked it. I stood at the edge of the water with a paintbrush in one hand, coffee mug in the other, listening to the soft slap of waves against the posts. The boards beneath me were new, but I'd stained them the same deep mahogany as the ones he used to sand every summer. That same crooked bench sat at the end, repaired, not replaced. Some things deserved to stay, just like he always said. The community was different now. The HOA board had been restructured, with Ruth acting as interim president. Karen? She never showed her face again after that meeting. Rumor had it she sold her house and moved out of state. Good riddance. I didn't need revenge, I just needed my peace back. And I got it. What surprised me most was how people came together after everything. Henry stopped by the dock last week with 2 six-packs and a quiet apology. Said he'd spent too long watching things happen instead of doing something about them. I didn't let him off the hook, but I didn't turn him away either. Some people just need to see the fire before they believe it's real. The dock had become more than just my family's space. Folks began asking if they could launch, again, from my ramp. I said yes, of course I did, but this time I put up a handmade wooden sign near the path. Just 3 words. Langley Landing, welcome. Not private, not members only, just something simple, honest, and rooted in what mattered. A legacy, not of control, but of community. This whole fight started because of a ramp, but it was never about the ramp. It was about respect, about dignity, about not letting entitled people rewrite what your family built just because they sit behind a desk with a clipboard. That ramp carried my dad's boats, my mom's laughter, my own memories of diving off it in the heat of July. It carried grief, too. On the night I sat there alone after the funeral, wondering if I could carry the family legacy without him. Turns out, I could. I didn't need titles or threats or citations. I just needed the truth and the will to see it through. So when Ruth invited me to the next HOA meeting to speak as a guest, I brought more than just paperwork. I brought Dad's old notebook, the one with the curled edges and faint coffee rings. I read a few of his words out loud. Not rules, just thoughts. Lines like, "A neighborhood only works if it feels like home. Don't build fences where a handshake would do. Always leave the dock cleaner than you found it." And when I looked up, I saw eyes soften, heads nod, even Ruth blinked a little longer than usual. That was closure. Not revenge, not gloating, just honor. And yeah, it felt damn good. You don't have to shout to be heard. Sometimes doing the right thing loud enough speaks volumes. Have you ever stood up to a board, boss, or bully who tried to take away something that mattered to you? I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from. You're not alone in this.